Hello, Tigers. My name is Melissa Zeman, maiden name Harmon from when I was at Trinity, class of '07. Welcome to the Learning TUgether live webinar series as part of the lifelong learning initiatives presented by Trinity University Office of Alumni Relations. As I mentioned, I own a shop in Chicago called BottlesUp, which is where I'm currently hiding in the office here while there's a lot of chaos outside. Everybody's drinking. And the Trinity Office of Alumni Relations invited me to chat with winemaker Adam Lee, class of '87. And of course, I said yes immediately. So Adam is the founder of Siduri Wines and the owner of Clarice Wine Company and Beaumarshay Winery, which we're going to talk about. About 5 years ago, Alumni Relations did a podcast with Adam, which is archived on the podcast page of the Lifelong Learning site. And a lot has changed in Adam's business world since then, but one thing remains the same. He is definitely a passionate and entertaining winemaker. Tonight, our conversation is going to revolve around Adam's beginning at Trinity and how we ended up in California. And then we're going to talk about Sudhuri and Beaumarshay and Clarice. And obviously there's going to be a lot of wine things plugged in there too. We definitely, anytime I do an event like this, and I'm sure Adam will agree, we want to make it fun and interactive as possible since we can't all be together in person. So please feel free to use the Q&A tab that I'm going to be monitoring. The chat is not functioning. So if you have a question, which I hope you do, or a comment or a general cheers, I'm drinking. Everybody else should be. Adam's drinking. He's got a glass. So cheers to the Tigers. And yeah, please use that Q&A. So let's just jump right in. Adam, let's start at the beginning, but not really the beginning. Where were you? Like whatever, a young sprite at Trinity. So 35 years out, then what comes to your mind when you think about your Trinity experience, and obviously how you ended up where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, Trinity, first off, was fantastic. And the reason we're doing it today instead of tomorrow, or we talked about doing it tomorrow, is that I will be back in San Antonio tomorrow as I have a son that is graduating from Trinity on Saturday. So I am, and we're going to be out eating and drinking someplace tomorrow night in San Antonio, which is fun and exciting. For me, for Trinity, it was a huge time of change. I grew up relatively sheltered in a Southern Baptist home in Austin, Texas. And when I went away to college, a lot of things changed in my life. It changed who I was in many ways. I loved writing for the Trinitonian. I wrote columns there. That was fantastic. It was kind of a time where we did a lot of protests about, looking back on it, some really important things occasionally, and sometimes about some silly things as well, like the Henry Miller statue. And so we turned it into and why the university spent money on that instead of giving money to students for free education or whatever. And so we turned it into the first hole. You had to hit that on the Frisbee golf course at the time. So it was just a bunch of change, a bunch of fun times. Not really wine related at that time at all.
What were you drinking? Tequila?
Tequila. I remember we had this whole thing charted out where we could go, you'd have happy hours. There was one place over on Broadway that started happy hour at like 1 o'clock. So you could hit that one earlier and then you could go to these other places. I remember that when we were really feeling flush, we would go down to the Hyatt on the river, and they would do margaritas that were strong, for one thing, because some of these other places less so. And then they had free nachos and free fajitas at happy hour. And that was like a score at that time.
Anything to get a free meal. I think everyone's been there at some point in their life for sure. And then, but also how then going from Trinity, and what was your degree in?
History. I would spend a lot of time with Char Miller and Gary Cates, and two professors that are now at Pomona University and are part of the Clarice mailing list too.
That's awesome. So you fall in love with Pinot Noir, and then
I came back, graduated, was looking at graduate school, and got a job, but I wasn't quite there yet. I had applied to Duke, I'd applied to Stanford and to Emory, I think were the three that I was looking at. I'm not sure my grades were quite up to those standards necessarily, but that was kind of, let's put off real life for as long as possible kind of scenario. But I started going to wine tastings up in Austin, Texas, that this guy was putting on, and he had he had three amazing wine stores actually, and but he was always disorganized at tastings, setting up the event. He'd be late. I'd be there early. That part of my Southern Baptist upbringing stuck with me. I show up to places early. So I showed up early. Sam would come in fumbling with the wines and glasses. And Adam, if you can help me set it up, I'll comp you the tasting. And so I'm like, sure, free tasting. It's great. And so I would help set up tastings. And eventually he asked me to come be assistant manager at one of his stores.
That's awesome. And then, and that was, what was the name of the store? Wasn't it Austin?
It was called Austin Wine and Spirits. There were 3 locations. I went from assistant manager to manager of that store. And actually, I became president of the company there for a little while.
Wow. So when did you eventually then go out to, I mean, just wrapping your head around starting a winery or starting Siduri Wines?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with that kind of stuff? Because even
so I ended up getting into wine wholesale for a while. I also worked on the floor of a restaurant selling wine. I did any number of things. I ended up becoming the wine buyer at Neiman Marcus department stores up in Dallas. And I met a woman, Diana Novi, and she was really into wine. She and I started dating, and we ended up moving out to California together. I moved out more to be a wine writer, honestly, more than I was to making wine. But she had the idea, and I went along certainly with it, that if we're going to write about wine, we should try making it. And what we loved to drink was Pinot Noir. So we had a combined savings of $24,000 and said, let's try. We were working in a tasting room at a place called Lambert Bridge Winery up in Dry Creek. And they agreed to let us make the wine there for virtually nothing. And we found a place that would sell us 1 acre's worth of grapes. And we went out and worked in the vineyard ourselves, all based on reading in books, not like, and talking and listening to some other people.
Yeah.
And we made 107 cases, 4.5 barrels that first year.
And that was Siduri?
That was Sudhuri.
Wow. That's, I mean, talk about just jumping in and getting your hands dirty. I mean, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, it was. We were fortunate, very lucky in some ways that it was 1994, which was a great vintage. I'm not sure if it had been 93, if we would have persevered in the way we did. The wine we thought was really good, but we weren't sure how good it was. You taste your friends on it and your friends are all like, that's great stuff, Adam. Of course, can I get a case free? Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, whatever. They might just be telling you that stuff. It turned out that one day we were at work drinking with customers and a fax came in from the Wine Advocate, Robert Parker. He's one of the leading critics in the world. He's retired now, but he was. And by leading critics in the world, I mean leading critics in the world of anything, I mean, like that kind of level. And he was looking for samples of different wines and he was staying over at Meadowood Resort over in Napa. And we drank some more. We went home, we drank some more, and we found some courage to say, let's take a bottle of wine to Parker. He'd love to taste it. So we drive up, we hand bottle it, put an Avery white label on it, along with a handwritten note. We drive over to Meadowood, we leave it with the concierge, and then we stopped and had dinner and drank more. This is not a great advertisement for drinking and driving back from Napa to Sonoma.
Oh yeah, that part. I was thinking of more the liquid courage. The
liquid courage is not all bad, but and so we drove back over, woke up the next morning, had one of those fuzzy, what did we do last night? And then it was like, oh crap, we didn't really do that, did we? We tried to get the sample back, but it was too late. But it turned out he loved it. He rated it one of the top 10 Pinots that year from all of California. And that was the beginning for us.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of press is especially, I feel like, well, I mean, it's still definitely a big talking point right now with people.
I think it's changed. I'm with you on that. I don't think that ratings and the like mean as much. People are looking more for stories now.
Yeah.
But we lived in an age of critics back then, not just in wine, but there was Frank Pryle, the restaurant critic for the New York Times. There was Siskel and Ebert for movies. There was, there was a whole period of critics. Nowadays, if you're going to go see a movie, or You know, you and I are going to look for something to watch. You're going to talk to friends and they're going to tell you, watch this on Netflix or watch this here or there.
Yeah.
It's not the same critical influence that it used to be in anything.
I think, yeah, that's definitely true. But it's nice when it works out where it's a good story and you got the points and your work was rewarded, which is awesome to like. And what a kind of, how did you take that news and did it just really catapult everything into a next level?
Yeah, so he actually left a message on the answer machine saying he thought the wine was terrific, but he lost all the notes on it, and could we send those over to him? So we spent a good bit of time pouring through old copies of the Wine Advocate, seeing what terrific meant as far as a number goes, because that's the adjective that he used. We started getting phone calls and people wanted to buy the wine, and it allowed us to make enough money. We sold it on futures. It allowed us to make wine the next year. So we went from 107 cases to 275 cases and grew it at that point. We kept day jobs, Diana through 98, me through 99. So that was 94 when we first made the wine. So it wasn't like an immediate success meant that we had, you know, loads and loads of income. I mean, it certainly helped, but we saved all of our vacation time for harvest to work. I mean, this was not a fun, easy, immediate, overnight success story.
Yeah. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. It's more so if you break it down to bullet points, I mean, it's just yeah, it boils down to hard work. Were you just, I mean, in terms of learning the winemaking skills, what were you doing for that?
Yeah, so that, you know, I have taken one day course in lab work, lab chemistry, doing my own lab chemistry. And one of the things that you do, you can add acid to wine and you can tell by a color shift in the wine, but I'm partially colorblind. So I wasted $275 on a class that did me no good whatsoever. Um, in that second year, we got fruit from a famous vineyard out on the Sonoma coast, the Hirsch Vineyard, David Hirsch's property out there. He sold us a very small amount of fruit. He really wanted to see what a small winery could do. He had had some success with some larger, more established wineries, but he wanted to find out if it was his fruit or was it the winemaking that was good. So he took a chance on us, almost because of our inexperience. And then it turned out the general manager at Lambert Bridge had some land that he had purchased up in Oregon and planted. And he saw what we did with Pinot and wanted to sell us grapes as well. So, and then we had the property in Anderson Valley. So we had 3 different vineyards. And I think what happened was we learned a lot by making wine in different places. And so we learned more quickly. If ultimately we ended up getting fruit from Oregon all the way down to Santa Barbara, but I would tell you that every harvest was like 3 harvests. There's the Oregon harvest, there's the North Bay with Sonoma County area, and then there's Monterey and Santa Barbara, and that's a 3rd harvest. So when people would look at me and say, well, you've only been making wine 8 years, I'd tell them, well, it's more like 24 years, because it's 24 different vintages. That, more than anything else, allowed us to learn very quickly.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, like winemaking 101 and where the grapes are growing and what kind of elements you're having to deal with is challenging to, I mean,
So 2011 in California, 2011 was a very wet year, very unusually so, very cool, very wet vintage. I tell people that we did better in 2011 in California because of our Oregon experience, where that happens on a more frequent basis. 2003 in Oregon was an extremely hot year. I tell people that we did better in 2003 in Oregon because of our California experience, where you will have some years which are warmer. I think those types of things, those types of experiences are invaluable.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. I'm seeing some comments that I kind of just want to touch on right now. Miles Cortez is drinking your 2018 Clarice Gary's Vineyard while he watches this. What's the optimal drinking time for my next 2 bottles?
For your next, so it's the Garys you're drinking? Is that 18?
Vineyard 18.
Yeah, you know, the 18 vintage was an ideal vintage. It was, I have 4 vintages that really stand out as being fantastic, 95, 99, 05, and 18. I think if you call every year outstanding, and you people who read wine notes or get offerings from wineries Nothing turns them off quicker if they say every year is the best year ever. I mean, it's just BS. You can't really believe that.
Yeah.
You couldn't sell wine if you told people,
Yeah.
everyone is the best wine. Oh, this is the best Pinot in the shop. And then the next one is the best Pinot in the shop.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
18 is one of those years that I think is very, very well balanced, very elegant, and shows well throughout the entire lifetime. So I think the 18s are going to drink fine, but I think they're going to last a long time. I'm actually drinking the 19 Gary's right now, which was a year that I was not as high on. It was better than 17, but not as good as 18, I didn't think. But I'm not sure about that anymore. I think 18 in the Central Coast 19 in the Central Coast is turning out to be as good, but maybe more structured. So I tell Miles, go ahead and hold on to one of those bottles, drink another one in the next year or two, hold on to one of them for longer than that, and then maybe age your 19s for a longer period of time.
Yeah. And I think that's a fun thing too, that I recommend people, not even as a sneaky sales tactic, but just to really see the transition of a bottle of wine as like drinking it right away and then drinking it a year and then 5 or 10. So like if you find a bottle that you really like, buying like 4 or 6 of them is a really fun experiment to do. And then you kind of see that journey of the bottle.
One thing on that I'll just mention that kind of be a helpful thing for folks. 2020 was a very challenging year. I mean, we may talk about it later, but there were smoke fires in Oregon and in Northern California and even in Monterey. Less so, Santa Barbara looks very good. It didn't really affect white grapes, but I think on reds, I would really recommend on 2020s, buy a bottle. Like if you have a wine that you normally buy 6 bottles of every year or a case every year, or even you from a wine store perspective, I would insist on tasting any 2020 reds before buying any kind of quantity of them.
Yeah, 100%. It's also, and I think more people, speaking about vintages, many more people are realizing, there's a question from Jennifer Zimmer about climate change and how it's impacting California and Oregon winemaking, present and future. But along that note, I think people are more aware that wine is supposed to change from vintage to vintage. And that's been a really kind of sigh of relief that you're like, yes, this isn't supposed to be some commercial product that is just like staying stagnant the whole time.
A long time ago, Coca-Cola bought Sterling Winery along with a couple of others and owned it, and they ended up selling it relatively quickly because you can make Coca-Cola in just the right amounts based on the market, and Coke is the same, year to year to year. The wine business doesn't provide that at all.
Yeah. What on that climate change subject?
Sure.
I know it's a big one to jump into, but
well, no, and it's a great one. I see it more in Oregon right now than I see it in California. And I'll give you a very, very practical way that I see it in Oregon. The Willamette Valley is one of the areas that is defined not only by where it is on the ground, but they have a lower level. You can't plant below, I think it's like 300 feet, and you can't plant above 1,200 feet because it won't ripen in those areas. And there's a risk of frost. That risk of frost still exists below 300 feet, so people aren't planting there. But above 1,200 feet, because it used to be too cool to get things right, people are now able to plant and get things ripe at that area. So they're actually talking about extending that area higher. That's a real change, a measurable change that you can say, look, this is climate change and how it's truly happening. Here in California, I guess I would point to the fires, to the issues that we have had. In 2008, there were fires, and I had 2 vineyards that were damaged and lost because of smoke damage to the grapes. And I was told, now this hasn't happened before. This is a once in a lifetime occurrence. I was evacuated from my home in 2017 and 2019 because of fires, and lost 3/4 of my grapes in 2020 because of fires. So the idea that this isn't going to happen again, obviously it is happening. I think you can go to France and actually much of Europe. In 2021, they lost a large amount of crop due to freeze this year. And areas like Châteauneuf-du-Pape down in southern France, where they don't even have the mechanisms to put out in the vineyards to protect them because they don't need them. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Yeah. They got scalded pretty bad too. So yeah, you are seeing these things happen on a much more frequent basis.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of, I mean, adapting and using the knowledge we have and coming together and changing things. I mean, it's hard to think of these institutions like you mentioned, like Châteauneuf-du-Pape as a region and what can be changing over there, whereas some of the regions in the states are quite a bit younger. On speaking about just to transition from Siduri into your new ventures, which is Beaumarshay and Clarice, and kind of tying that into some of the French aspect, what how did that come about, and what are you really excited about these two?
Sure. So I sold Siduri to Jackson Family Winery about 6 years ago now. That was nothing that I'd really planned on. I mean, it's a longer story than anybody really wants to hear, but it came about and it was just the right time. I think for me, there had gotten to a point, Siduri at that point in time was about 25,000 cases. So imagine 107 cases to 25,000 cases without much of a business plan all along the way. I look back and, I was history and English double major and poli-sci minor, and it all worked out. But it wouldn't have hurt me once or twice to have taken a business course here or there, and that might have helped at some point in time. I think that having sold it, it was a time where I felt like the business had gotten big enough, it was running me rather than I was running the business. And so I wanted to then get back to just having something small, hands-on that was my own.
Yeah.
And that started out with Clarice Wine Company, which I have a bottle right here. Clarice was my grandmother. She was born in Giddings, Texas, and eloped to Dimebox, Texas at the age of 15. And but she taught me to cook in a pot. And she would tell me, a crock pot, and she would tell me, you put the meat, the potatoes, the carrots, the stew, the broth, the seasonings, and they all meld together. So with Clarice, I have taken kind of a similar approach with winemaking. I take two sections of a vineyard that are fairly disparate. They ripen at different times. There are different parts of the vineyard, or they have different rootstock or clones, and I pick them together at the same time when the whole section is ripe, which means some of it's probably overripe, some of it's probably underripe, but I blend it together from the very first moment on. And this is my own heartfelt project. I get 4 acres worth of fruit, 2 at a vineyard called Gary's and 2 at a vineyard called Rosella's. And I'm never going to grow it. And the people that always laugh at me when I say that are my best friends, because they're like, you said that about Siduri too. He wasn't going to get any bigger. And then it kept getting bigger and bigger. But this is a case where with Clarice, I'm really just going to do these 4 acres. I'll do it till I'm dead, or I have a great vintage. I'm in my 80s and I stop then. Or if my kids want to take it over and grow it, that would be the exception. That's when it would grow.
There's a question if you are still involved at all with Siduri after the sale. Or
I am, yes. Actually, I still do a decent amount with Siduri, but also with Jackson Family in their Pinot program as a whole.
Cool.
So I work on several different properties. I'm actually making this year for Jackson about 120 tons. So that's almost 7,000 cases worth of Pinot that they'll use in various labels or various projects. So yeah, I'm still very involved with them. And I was on a recent sales trip, my first sales trip in 15 months, I think it was. It was kind of wild, but I was on a sales trip and I was using Siduri Chardonnay. Siduri's just started making a Chardonnay. Matt, the new winemaker there, I'm not very good at white wine making. He's very good at white wine making. And I was using it at all my events.
Cool. That's awesome. And did you launch Clarice and Beaumarchais at the same time, or was it?
No, so Clarice started with the 2017 vintage. And then I went over to France in 2018 with a good friend of mine, Mike Officer. We went to Châteauneuf because we both had a love of the wines from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and they had a few great vintages. And so 15 was very, very good. 16 was amazing. 17 was better than 15, but maybe not quite as good as 16. And so we're like, this is the time. If we're going to go, we went as a vacation. We went to hang out. We had lunch arranged with a guy named Philippe Camby. Philippe is one of the leading winemakers in the world, actually, but he works with 81 different wineries. He lives in Chateauneuf. That's his area of expertise is Grenache in Chateauneuf. And we ended up changing it from lunch to dinner. We had a long dinner with him, drank a lot. And at one point he said, Adam, I've always dreamed of making Pinot Noir. And I loved that explanation. I loved that. Um, he could have said, I think I can make Pinot Noir well, because he's done incredibly well with critics and reviewers. He could have said, I think I could make money doing it. There are a lot of things he could have said, but that wasn't it. I always dreamed of making Pinot Noir. So when I got back, I sent him a thank you email, and I mentioned that and said, would you ever consider doing a project with me? And he said, yes, he would love to. So we started Beaumarshay Winery then with the 2019 vintage. Very different wines. It's much more of his expression of making Pinot. I kind of shepherd the grapes. I'm here on the ground, but he is the one that's really directing the winemaking. So I'll just give you one example. With red grapes, when you ferment the wine, you leave it on the skins for a certain amount of time, and much of the flavor and the color comes from mixing the skins around. And with Pinot, that process usually takes 17 to 21 days. With the Beaumarchais wines, we are on the skins between 42 and 48 days. So much longer period of time. He uses different barrel types than I have used for Pinot before. Just one thing after the other makes the Beaumarchais wines really unique, really his expression, combined our expression, but his expression of Pinot Noir kind of funneled through me.
So what kind then, speaking, I mean, that is very different process. Absolutely. So if for consumers, what should they expect to kind of get out of that?
So the wines are big and rich and full bodied for Pinot, darker color, darker flavors, weightier. A lot of times people will say Pinot goes with everything. And I do think Pinot is one of the most versatile wines out there. I mean, you can go with fish, or I actually love Pinot Noir with beets in many cases.
I like that.
It can go up to steak, but on steak, usually you're kind of like, okay, let's do a little bit lighter, maybe a more fatty cut, like some Wagyu or something like that can work. No, these Beaumarchais wines are like, let's get the big New York on the grill, and
Okay.
it's a big, rich. It's like a cab lover's Pinot in some ways.
Cool. And I mean, you hear about Pinot Noir in the industry and how it's just traditionally and historically a very difficult grape. And here you are. I mean, you are Mr. Pinot. Like, what do you love just like being up to the challenge? Like, can you speak a little bit about growing Pinot and how difficult that can be?
Yeah, it's funny. So years ago, there was a guy. He's a legend in the wine world. He's passed away just recently. Bert Williams. He was part owner of an amazing winery called Williams Cellium, and it really put modern day Pinot on the map. There were some grandfathers before that did some amazing things, but it really put modern California Pinot Noir on the map. And Bert one time told me, and he told me not to tell anybody, but now that he's passed, I can probably share it.
Well, this is a good thing. This is recorded and it'll be up on the Trinity site, so everyone will know.
There you go. He told me everybody says Pinot's difficult, but it's not difficult. It's demanding. And there's a difference between the two. Difficult is if it doesn't respond in logical ways, or it doesn't, I mean, you can't figure out what to do. Demanding for me with Pinot Noir means that you have to do everything right. You really control the yields out in the vineyard. If there's too much fruit on the vines, it doesn't respond well. You buy the best oak. You do everything you can to make a top end wine, and you're still going to fail some of the time. I mean, it's still not going to work out. With certain wines, and I've made things other than Pinot. I've made Cabernet, I've made Syrah. On those, you can say, I'm going to cut a few corners here. I'm going to cut a few corners there because I'm trying to make a lower priced wine. And by doing that, and it works out fine. You made a very good Cab, I made a very good Syrah, that kind of thing, by making something lower priced. With Pinot, you don't really have that option. With Pinot, you are always aiming for the stars. In some odd way, that made it easier for me because I didn't have choices in that regard. You aimed to do the best no matter what.
Yeah. You mentioned oak, and I think oak is another really interesting topic of conversation, especially talking with consumers and figuring out what they like and what they don't. What does your barrel program look like in a lot of the wines that you're making, or what do you prefer?
Yeah, so everything is French oak. I there are, but okay, so that, some people would be like, okay, well, that answered the question. Doesn't even come close to answering the question. There are
2 hours
many,
on barrels.
oh yeah, no, I mean, there are many different forests that you can get stuff from. There are different producers of barrels, and you would think that doesn't matter, but go to one pizza joint and then go to another pizza joint and tell me that the maker doesn't matter. I mean, it's huge. There's different toasting ways that they toast. For me, I have looked for first and foremost barrel producers that are consistent. That is more important. I mean, you can then know what you're getting every year and feel dependent that you're confident you know what you're getting. I remember one time I was at a certain cooperage house over in France, and they toast the barrels over a fire. They have them open over a fire, and there's light toast, medium toast, heavy toast. There's actually medium plus toast, that kind of thing. The guy's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and not really paying attention. And I ask him, how do you know if it's medium or medium plus? I mean, there's no timer, there's no anything. He's been doing this probably for 40 years. I mean, he's like, here's this new guy asking the question, what in the world? He walks a few feet over where they have the head of the barrel, and it's stamped on the head. If it's medium toast, it's got an M. If it's medium plus, it's got a M with a plus after it. And he looks at the head, he looks back at me, and he says, it says here it's medium plus, so the barrel is medium plus toast. So it's like, it's written down, so that's what you're going to be getting, kind of thing. I don't want that answer. I want somebody who's like, here's how we do it consistently every year. And I have found a few cooperage houses that I feel have that consistency year in, year out, and I know what I'm getting from them, and those are the ones that I buy from.
And I think that's what sets you apart so much, and it shows in the wines that you're making is just this attention, and you're really trying a lot harder for the greater good of the end result of what's in people's glasses. So that's awesome. I commend you.
Well, thank you. That is one of the things that is both incredibly rewarding, incredibly time consuming, and incredibly frustrating. Is you only get one chance a year to make wine. It's not like if you're writing. I mean, I did a lot of writing during COVID, and kind of sucks today, so I'm not going to write as much. So then tomorrow, you rewrite what you had, and you did this or that, and those types of things, you get opportunities to do over. You don't get an opportunity. You get one vintage a year, and in doing that, you better take advantage of it. I mean, I look at it. I'm now 56 years old. I'd love to say at 86 I'll still be doing Clarice, maybe doing a swan, but that's 30 chances. I mean, it's not like forever.
I think that kind of ties into Molly Eggs. I'm monitoring the Q&As. Molly asked, Molly Alexander, hello, Molly. Tell us how your love of history and love of wine intersect. And I think you just answered it based on, you get one shot and
Sure.
you have to kind of make history with it. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's Hamilton about not wasting your shot too, also.
oh,
But
100%. I'm glad you caught that, because that was definitely what I was going for.
there you go. But the other thing too is that Beaumarchais, here, I'll even show that. I've got that labeled here as well. So Pierre Beaumarchais was a seminal seminal person in French history. He did many things. I mean, is a Renaissance man, designed watches, changed watch design at the time. He wrote The Marriage of Figaro. That's probably what he's best known for. But he formed a sham company, a complete, total fake company called the Rodrigo Hortola Company. in France in the late 1700s. He took money from the French government and the Spanish government, $1 million back in the 1700s, and funneled from both of them and funneled it to the young colonists in America to help them fight against the British. And so when I started Beaumarchais with Philippe, I came up with this historical figure where a Frenchman helped the Americans, and thought that was a great tie-in, and Philippe loved the idea. And so, I mean, there's a really direct way that history came up with the name. People all the time ask me, why did you put George Washington on the label? And I'm like, no, that's Pierre Beaumarchais. They wore powdered wigs back then. And so I think, honestly, I think you and I, Melissa, if we pulled it back and all that, and we put powdered wig on you and pulled it powdered wig on me, we wouldn't look all that different in profile in some ways. So yeah, it's George Washington, it's Jefferson, it's Adams, it's Pierre Beaumarchais. Who can tell who it is?
We'll try that next webinar we do. We'll try that one out for sure. Or maybe live in person. We'll do a big, so actually speaking of, at Beaumarchais and Clarice, do you have tasting rooms if people were to come visit?
I've got a place that you can come and visit. It's I've done several different things. I've tasted at a winery. It's not like an open daily tasting room. It's by an appointment. It's just me really there. I now have a person working with me. So, I mean, there can be a couple of us, but like during harvest, September, October, I can't do it. I'm making wine, so you can't do it then. But then with other people who feel comfortable with it, obviously COVID's changed that. I have people over to the house sometimes and say, let's come over and relax. I mean, you're Trinity alums, your friends that right off, come over. Let's have a tasting, but let's enjoy a glass or two as well and talk about the old days and go into the Bonham and quarter a drink night on Wednesday nights, that kind of thing. Those are fun.
I love that. And that's my love of the wine industry for sure, is those kind of experiences.
I mean, I ask your opinion on this. I love wine. I adore wine. I know you've got a wine shop. You've got to adore wine. I mean, that's a lot of work too. Wine is a way of bringing people together. Yeah. That's the real joy of what we are involved in, is a career. Sitting here and having great wines like you do in your shop, or hopefully that I try to make, if you had to drink them by yourself all the time, that's no fun.
Yeah, I mean, it happens sometimes, but sure, yeah. And that's okay. But it's definitely that bringing, you mentioned like not having any business classes. I was a communications major at Trinity, and yeah, a business class probably would have been a little helpful when I was writing that business plan of the shop. But it's really the drive of the connectivity of wine and bringing people together, and having that space to do that has been amazing. And you're doing it in the same way, but a different method. Circling back on some of these questions that I've been writing down, the interest in Pinot Noir, do you feel, I mean, I think Pinot Noir is just a classic in my mind, and I don't think that the interest in Pinot Noir is ever going to go away. Obviously, there was the crazy boom of Pinot Noir when Sideways came out. Do you feel like it's growing, or has it plateaued? What in your experience?
I think Pinot has to some extent plateaued. You look at out there, I mean, so many people got into Pinot. You saw a lot of wineries that felt like they had to have a Pinot in their portfolio. They're a cab producer, they're whatever, but we had to have a Pinot during that Sideways boom and going forward there. I think it didn't get as bad as Merlot, because I still think there are some people that are doing really, really great work with Pinot, really specializing in it. But I think that didn't help when it became so ubiquitous that you felt like everybody was doing that. I think that was that's a point where it almost became somewhat saturated out there.
Yeah. But I think that's where, I mean, what you're doing differently with Clarice and Beaumarchais, that's kind of what is going to be interesting moving forward, where you get these smaller operations and projects.
And that's interesting. I mean, and yes, I think from a market point of view, I hope you're correct in that. I will tell you from my own point of view, after making Pinot Noir at Siduri for as many years as I did and all that, being able to go out and say, I'm looking at it in completely new ways. Beaumarchais, having Philippe make me look at a grape that I known intimately for 20 plus years. And now I'm like, oh crap, I never thought of making it like that before. I never thought of it. That's exciting.
Yeah.
that makes me not 56. That makes me 26 and like, oh my God, I'm going to run headfirst into this stuff and be probably a little too silly about it, but it's fun.
And I think, I mean, that's awesome to hear you get that excited about something new. And I think that's something that more consumers now are looking for, that excitement and looking and being willing to try new things and explore, particularly new regions too. Like, in your opinion, there was a question about vineyards and where you would be excited to potentially buy or start a project. Make it even more challenging. Thinking outside of Oregon and California, where would you want to go?
So I will make an announcement kind of here, breaking news and all that.
Hey,
I have been approached about a possibility. I don't know that it's going to happen this coming year, but making wine in New Zealand, making Pinot.
yes. Okay, we'll visit you there.
Yes, you can come to New Zealand and visit me. Now, an opportunity has come to me, and I think I've kind of got a drop dead deadline of November to be able to. If in November we can travel to New Zealand, there's a possibility that there would be a New Zealand Pinot from the 2023 vintage, because they harvest 6 months differently. Their harvest is March, April, and that's a possibility. If I can't get there because they are shut down pretty tight with COVID restrictions and all of that, then I would wait till the next year.
Yeah,
But hopefully I would still get over there during the growing season.
that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's really exciting.
And New Zealand Pinot Noir is very underrated, I think, in my opinion. So I can't wait to hear more about that. What about, there was a question about your favorite, being a writer and obviously probably a reader. What is your favorite kind of wine reading, either like a book or, a reporter or anything that you think people should be following?
Sure. I mean, first off, there's an amazing biography on Pierre Beaumarchais that people can look up. I mean, for one, I would highly recommend. It's really what comes up on Amazon when you look up Beaumarchais and books. I would recommend that, not to so much tied into the wine, but just, I mean, it ties into the wine now because of this, but that wasn't a seminal theme in that book. I read pretty much whatever I can when it comes out. I do think creative wine writing is a bit more limited right now in some ways. The best publication for that is something called The World of Fine Wine. It comes out once a quarter. It's expensive. I don't know, $200 a year or something for a subscription, but it is chock full of wine and philosophy, it really takes wine to another level. And I think that's part of what those of us who really, really love wine find it attractive. It's not just you're drinking something tasty. You're like, it brings in history, it brings in experiences, it brings in memories, and it brings in the I still drink Rocchioli Pinot Noir because Sandy was there, or I mean, all of this stuff is mixed together in a way that that makes it special. And The World of Fine Wine is that publication that does that best.
Cool. I might have to get a subscription actually, because I've not seen that one. There was a question about how about Intro to Adam? If somebody wanted to kind of see what you've done in your like Pinot Noir portfolio, what would be 2 wines that you would recommend somebody seek out and try to taste?
Sure. One that you can find out in the market pretty widely right now is a Siduri wine from 2018, the Siduri Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. I think that Willamette Valley Pinot 18 was a stunning year in Oregon. I mean, I told you how good it was in California. It was stunning in Oregon as well. I think that wine at a very fair price point is extraordinarily good, and one that I'm incredibly proud of. And I mean, there are some places out there you can find it at $20, but I think that I would feel fantastic about. Current vintage, it would be the 2018 Gary's, because I think that is one of the best wines I have made from Clarice, the Clarice Gary. So I think that would work. I actually think the best wines I've probably made are of 1995 Hirsch Pinot Noir, 1999. We did a wine called Christian David, named after the son who's graduating Trinity on Saturday. And it was on his birth year, and everything about that wine was incredibly special. And then a 2005 Bonnie Vineyard Pinot was pretty incredible. So if you, the 1999 Christian David is drinking still okay. The 2005 Pizzoni's drinking pretty well. I haven't had the 95 Hirsch in a while, and that's getting pretty old for Pinot. So it would be interesting to see how it's doing.
The oldest Pinot I had was in '85, which was my birth year, and it was the Irie Vineyards in Willamette Valley.
And they make wines that age very well. You're fortunate to have been born in '85. It's a pretty great year in Bordeaux, pretty great year in California. I mean,
Port,
Port, 85 ports are.
I have one in the fridge.
Yeah, no, they're knockout, and it's a year. I mean, the great and sad thing about port is it doesn't really go up in value that much anymore. People don't appreciate it in the same way. So, I kind of wonder, why would you buy a 2015 port when you can buy an 85 for $20 more and it's already been aged for you?
Yeah. Yep. I think going back to the beginning in terms of some local, like Texas recommendations, somebody asked about places to shop or small shops to support in either Austin, San Antonio, Houston. Not sure what kind of people We talked about a mutual love for John at the Austin Wine Merchant, he's just such a great guy. So if you're in Austin, definitely go check out John.
Yeah, the Austin Wine Merchant is, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's a lot to say it's the best shop in Texas because I haven't been to all of them, but it's up there. I mean, it's as good as it gets. And John is as good a person as it gets. I worked with John at Austin Wine and Spirits way back when. And yeah, he's fantastic. He tastes everything. He knows, and you come in with I'm looking for this, and he's like, I've tried this and I love this. He's fantastic there. There's a shop in Houston called the Houston Wine Merchant that's very, very good. I like it quite a bit. I should spend more time in San Antonio in going around shop to shop. I do know on Friday night, we're going out to, I think it's called Signature, a restaurant out in San Antonio, kind of outside of town a bit, but they carry Clarice there, and it's an incredible wine list, at least. So as far an incredible food, so it's a wonderful place to go hang out.
I was recently on a webinar with the owner of High Street Wine Company, which is over in the Pearl Brewery District. You should check it out when you're in San Antonio. I was really impressed with what they have going on too. Somebody also asked in the Q&A about your advice for getting into the industry without any experience. I mean, I think you've just proven in the way you've lived to just jump in and get your hands dirty and start, climbing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely. I still think people ask me all the time, could you do what you did now? Of course you couldn't. It would take too much money. I'm like, no, I think you probably could. I mean, we started with $24,000. It'd probably be 50 or 60 now. I mean, things have gone up, but as long as you're willing to work other jobs, you get growing that way. You could start your own winery with still a very small amount of money. It's possible to get into the industry. I think one of the best ways is to look at some places that are looking for harvest interns. Yeah. And you come out, you work at a winery, and you work for harvest. It's a 6 or 8 week process. It's long hours and very physical work, but from a wine making point of view, at least, there's no better way. And the stories about interns hooking up and all sorts of crazy, wild things that happen, they're all true. It's fun. It's an incredible. I walked in one time. I felt bad because I had to leave early and pick kids up from school, and they were still cleaning up at the winery. And I go back after I got the kids kind of all settled, and there's still 2 cars out front. And I'm like, oh crap, I feel bad. They're still cleaning up. They're still there, and it's late. And I walk in and the door dings and quickly a guy comes sliding out of the tank with no shirt on and all of that. And two interns were having sex in a tank.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
That's a good story. There's a mention of off-color story or two in this promo, so I'm glad that you filled that one for sure.
yeah.
We're getting close to time. There was one other question, favorite Burgundian producers, which is an interesting one.
It is, and I think it's fascinating to go over to. I mean, I could give you actually right now probably a list of more Chateauneuf producers than I could Burgundian producers, given that I'm spending more time with Philippe. And in fact, knock on wood, I am there at the end of June. I'm going to go spend some time and see Philippe in Chateauneuf. It looks like. I think I'll be able to make that work. Burgundian producers, there's one called Fourier that I like quite a bit. I like one called Dugat P a lot. I love the wines from Dujac. I think those are a very different style, but very, they do a lot of whole cluster, very elegant, very pretty. But I think Burgundy is a bit of a minefield. I think it's real challenging. And I've got a dinner coming up on Tuesday night with Jean-Charles Boisset from what, and I think, and Gina Gallo actually. And I think that's going to be a topic of conversation a little bit is,
Yeah.
Jean-Charles, I mean, I like his wines quite a bit over there. I mean, several things that he does. I think that will be a real topic of, how do you navigate this? How there are great producers. There are producers that have great reputations, but I just don't love the wines as much as I should.
Yeah. 6 minutes left. Final thoughts about anything you're really excited about looking to the future. Obviously, I mean, these two projects that you just launched, I mean, I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
They're just so fun and different. Anything else? Obviously, you mentioned you teased New Zealand, but what else besides that?
Um, there are a couple of things. So one of the things we didn't really talk about is that I consult with a number of other wineries too. So I consult with Roar Wines. I'm their Pinot Noir consultant. I consult with a winery in Santa Barbara called Peak Ranch. I consult with a couple of people in Sonoma County, Booker, and one called J Cage. I really enjoy, and they're all small. And Jackson is been incredibly cool about me consulting. I mean, yes, I had a non-compete. They were like not a thing though on tiny producers like this. If it helps your reputation, it helps our reputation to have you around, kind of thing. So that's they've been a fantastic group to be associated with. I guess I look forward to new places, new adventures, new things still. New wineries that have a different vision, and listening to people and say, okay, what is your vision of Pinot Noir? What is your way that you want to take this? And when that can happen, then that gives it an opportunity for me to listen to them and express someone else's vision, but me try to shepherd it along the way.
Yeah. I mean, that is something like, how do you ever make that public really? Is there a place where you list all the places?
I don't
Or
write
behind
off
the scenes?
only because I'm not I haven't quite done that. I think that'll be something that will happen in the future at some point. Will there be, I mean, Philippe on his website has the list of like all 81 places he consults with. I think that will be something there that will come up at some point in time. There's another winery actually that makes very reasonably priced wine that I consult with now called Ron Rubin. He founded Republic of Tea, but Ron Rubin's kind of fun and interesting. And he's got me consulting on the Pinot and David Ramey, one of California's iconic Chardonnay producers, consulting on the Chardonnay. So
Wow.
that's like, that's just starting this year, but that's going to be pretty fun.
Yeah. So you're not busy at all. It's just going to be smooth sailing for the years to come.
I got nothing going on. I'm not taking on new projects. I'm not doing anything silly. I got all this free time. During COVID, one of the best things was I wrote 6 different plays. I took playwriting at Trinity, and I loved that aspect of writing. I used to picture myself as the great American novelist, and it turned out that it's like, no, not quite. But I like
Not
writing.
yet, maybe not yet.
But well, there's a resort and restaurant that carries the wine down in Ojai, California, Ojai Valley Inn and Spa, and they are going to do an event with me. We're just with COVID, it got delayed, where I'm going to do a winemaker dinner there, but they're going to put on one of my 10-minute plays
Cool.
before the dinner, and that will be, people will be gathered around and watch the play, and then we'll have the dinner afterwards.
I mean, that sounds like a whole nother business opportunity for you, is like dinner and a play.
There's no money in that, sadly, but it is something that I love and I'm passionate about, and so being able to do that is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the lesson here, kids, is follow your passion. Even if you have many of them, they go in different directions. Well, I just wanted to wrap things up by saying thank you to Adam. Clearly, you have so much going on, so it's been really fun to chat with you for this past hour, for sharing your knowledge and stories. And also thank you to Trinity, our alma mater, for organizing this, and thanks to y'all. I say y'all like now because I try to keep that Texas in me, but for tuning in. If you're interested in additional Learning Together content, including other webinars, podcasts, and book club information, you can visit the Lifelong Learning page on the alumni site. So with that, cheers to Adam, cheers to Trinity, cheers to everyone here. Go buy Siduri, Clarice, Beaumarshay, look for Adam's plays, and I'll be looking for that New Zealand operation you got going on for sure.
Thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.